I wanted to start this TEDx speech with something a little bit unconventional because it is the last speech of the day. So instead of giving what my TEDx speech is going to be about, I want to give more of a reason as to why I'm giving this TEDx speech in the first place. And it all kind of started with a good old fashioned bowl of Maggie noodles. Now, I know that might sound a little bit unconventional and weird, like I said, but I started my debating journey a few years back, 4 or 5 years ago, when I fought with my parents and argued with them at 12 a.m. midnight on why I should be having Maggie noodles, why it's the best dish in the world, the most healthiest, and the greatest option for me. Unfortunately, not in my favor, I lost that debate badly and I got punished for a month that I wouldn't have Maggie otherwise. Now, my point isn't to help convince you on how you can use debating for winning or losing, but it's just an idea of a tool, a secret tool for me and maybe for you, and any other tool that you can use to be able to grow yourself. Just like debating helped me grow, not just in my community, not helping just my community grow overall, but also me as a person and transform myself. When I was younger, my parents always told me, Beta, don't argue so much, it's not really good. But here I am on a TEDx stage because I turned this arguing into somewhat of a full-time career, but I wouldn't really call it arguing because I'll call it debating, and that sounds far more respectable to an audience. That said, I do want to read the room a little bit, and if you would be kind enough to raise your hand if you've ever engaged in some form of a disagreement, debate, argument with someone. So if you could just raise your hand. And yeah, you can look around and see how many people did, right? And even if you didn't raise a hand, you probably have engaged in some argument or some or the other form. And I can tell you why, not just because maybe debating sounds a little bit too fancy and a professional kind of a thing, but you probably have had some level of opinion, some level of claims, disagreement. Point being that debating is inherently present, and it was really present in my life, and that's why I chose it to become something meaningful to me and have an impact on me. And that's why a few years ago, I started something called the Teen Debater, a community where I wanted to give out public speaking skills, communication skills, critical thinking to other students. And I thought, to be honest, at first, I would just give around these skills, train some students, coach them, help them boost their confidence, and that's about it. End over there. But life turned its pages and had a completely different plan for me when the Teen Debater became a community of over 10,000 plus students 2 years later in 250 different schools across the country, and now a registered not-for-profit under our government. And although these numbers really do matter and they did have some level of an impact, the more important thing to me personally was the kind of impact the students had on me and what they taught me. Because I remember the first time when I ever started to even coach in the first place, I coached a girl, and this was my first time coaching, so I was really scared. She came up to me, she was really, really shy, very soft-spoken, so much so that even the ceiling fan was louder than her. And to be honest, she wasn't doing great. But months of practice, got a lot of debate, speeches, different arguments, discussing back and forth with her. And then she came back to give this final speech in one of the debate days, a conclusion speech, took a deep breath, and gave a fiery 3-minute argument on feminism and women's rights and why they're extremely crucial in today's modern world. And I realized all this while that while I thought I was giving her something, she gave me something in return too. And that was patience. Patience to not rush outcomes, but rather be able to see the transformation and wait for it to happen. Another time, there was this big debate that I had the opportunity to view between a big metro city student and a student from a small town. And as you would expect, on paper, a student from a metro city had all the advantages possible, right? Exposure, expensive coaching, the best people helping him. But the student from the small town, he had something really different. He had courage, fierce, unbalanced, pure courage. And that is something that I really couldn't predict or expect. But that day, while I again thought I was teaching debating, he taught me something far bigger than that: humility. And that talent does not choose its places. It can come anywhere, and it really doesn't come with a price tag. And then there's obviously the big old-fashioned pineapple on pizza debate. I'm not going to give my opinion on it because I don't want to create a debate on that here as well. But I had the opportunity to view that debate, and it was extremely fun. Passionate argument arguments, students quoting statistics all around, and somehow there were international case studies proving that pineapples on pizza really improved the pizza, or it did not. Point being that a lot of these different students came from different cultures, backgrounds, values, and they really became a product of those things. And each of these stories taught me something, whether it was humility, courage, resilience, being honest, and any of these kind of ideas. And I realized that, again, while I was teaching some form of debating, and debating lessons was something that I was giving, instead I received life lessons from a lot of these students. And I believe that in all of these aspects, debating has a much deeper purpose. And I don't think that is significantly just limited to competitions or events, but debating can actually help you break barriers and question social norms and being able to think critically. I'm not telling you to go ahead and not listen to someone and not listen to authority, because that's not always true. Authority may be right, and sometimes people do tell you right things, good things. But I'm telling you not to listen to someone blindly. You should still be questioning them, thinking critically, understanding and analyzing, and making sure you agree with that decision. And debating gives you the freedom to be able to have that agency and autonomy to be able to think on your own and make the decision out of your own free will because you agree with that. Moreover, I think debating really creates that nature of leadership in individuals, because I would feel that on surface, the best debaters aren't individuals who are the best leaders themselves, but are people who create the best leaders out of others and spark this fire of leadership in anyone else. From my own school personally, I've learned this idea of servant leadership, which does not really reflect the nature of being a leader means being a boss, but rather it means about being a builder, someone who can spark that leadership in someone else and make them independent in their own journey so that they can walk proudly and lead their own status later on. And that is literally what it means to be a servant leader, and ideally what comes out across through debating. And so it creates this beautiful, independent community that does not need anyone else and can live, thrive, and more importantly, grow on its own and give out to other individuals and other people. I also do think, and I think this is a way for you to imagine, and you can picture this in your mind, but try and think of a police officer. Any police officer, and you can just picture who they are, what do they look like, all of that. And if I'm just going to go out and guess on a roll here, you probably would have pictured a police officer wearing a khaki-colored shirt, which makes sense because we are around that culture. That's what we have grown up seeing. That's what happens in our region. But if I ask the same question to someone in Calcutta, in an audience in Calcutta, then they probably would have said a white shirt because that's the kind of norm over there and that's the culture over there. Point being, culture really matters to a lot of individuals and affects the way they think and their populist behavior on what the correct notion of a certain idea may be. But debating transcends these sort of boundaries and helps you grow beyond that. What it does really is that it forces you to think about ideas and push for beliefs that you may not necessarily believe in or have personal beliefs aligned with, but you still have to defend them in debating. And that's really beautiful because you know what that does? It teaches you humility, sensitivity, and helps you understand the reasons why people think in certain ways. And that means for a debater, instead of seeing these as differences, they learn to live by these differences, respect them, and actually get something meaningful out of them. Which means by debating, you don't become a smarter person just quote unquote by the books, but you actually just become a better human being. I remember my dad, he had told me this Sanskrit shlok. I will not say it out in Sanskrit because my pronunciation isn't the best, but the literal translation of it in English was, knowledge is wealth. The more you give out knowledge, the more it will spread and powerful it will become. And the more you hoard it, the more it decays, worsens. And ultimately, it's not knowledge and wisdom. It becomes more surface level information that has no purpose. And this really does make sense, right? Because, and this is not just about debating anymore. It becomes a lot more about giving. Because all this while in my speech and this TED talk, I've talked about why debating was so important. But the point wasn't, again, to convince you to join debating or my institution, or for that matter, any debating academy or any of that. But it was to help you understand that debating as a tool for me was to be able to channel my growth through the growth of others. And you can do the same by just being able to give something to your own community, because that really transforms you as a person yourself. And so a good way to transition from this would be this idea that when you think of debaters, debaters aren't individuals who are just meant to speak up for themselves. And the best debaters often don't just speak. The best debaters are ones who actually take the time to listen, because the best gift you can give someone is your full and free attention. And that's what it means to give. Giving is multiplying. The more you give to someone, the more it'll spread in the community and share around. And if you don't realize it by now, if you do give to some person, whether it is in the form of me teaching debating or you teaching them another skill, you sharing another life lesson, your experience, your ideas, your notions, perspectives, arguments, any of these diverse things that we individuals as human beings have. And whenever you share with them, you just don't expand their world, you also expand a little bit of yours. And so a person who's humorous might give humor, will also give out joy. Someone who gives time will give love. Someone who gives knowledge will give strength. And someone who gives arguments, like me, might give you a little bit of a different perspective. And so don't think of giving as sacrificing, rather think of it as an investment that returns its dividends in the form of growth. You don't really add only to the world by giving, but you also add to your own world, because you give to yourself the moment you start giving to others, and you transform yourself as a person when you give back to your community, when you start helping anyone else as well. And what that means is, for me personally, like I shared in debating, when I gave, I grew, and in return I found out that giving is growing. But if you come back to that whole Maggie debate, or whether iPhones are better than Macs, or why you want either of them from your parents, or all of that stuff, it really isn't about winning or losing as much as it is about becoming something more, becoming something better, and an improved version of yourself. And maybe that's the real win. Thank you so much.